Welcome to the Bronx African American History Project. My name is Steven Payne, librarian and archivist at the Bronx County Historical Society. And I'm here with JoEllen Eisenman Sgueglia, an artist whose family has lived for multiple generations in the Coops, or United Workers Cooperative Colony, located at 2700 Bronx Park East. So we begin these oral history interviews by asking, why don't you tell us about your family and how they ended up in the Bronx?
Okay, well, my grandfather was very high up there in the Jewelers Union. And when they heard that they could move from the Lower East, well, actually from Harlem at that point, um, they invested in the Coops, and his whole family came. I'm finding out that more and more of them came. His brothers, his mother. It's amazing how many. So there were 6 children in my father's family. He was the oldest son, and they all moved here. And I now have that apartment, that original apartment that my grandparents had.
Wow. And do you know much about your grandparents' background as far as where they might have lived before New York? Anything about their life before coming to the Bronx?
He, well, they were both born in Russia, in Belarus. And what my cousin Estella was saying was in a shaitel, I don't even know, shtetl. Um, she actually had the name. I had written down somewhere in the other room. I could tell you that if you want to know. And he came because he was a revolutionary and fought against the czars. He was imprisoned, and there was a big uprising outside the prison, and he was shot by the guards.
Mm.
So he came to the U.S. with a bullet in his leg.
Wow.
And that stayed in his leg for the rest of his life. My grandmother was pregnant with my father, obviously, and she came 2 years later. So that would be my 1912. My grandmother came and joined him here, and they lived on the Lower East Side. And at some point moved to Harlem. Again, my cousin Estelle, and I'm going to say Tamar, because that's her real name now.
Sure.
She would know more about probably that part of the history, but that's how they ended up in the Coops. I mean, they were the originals.
Yeah, yeah. And so at least from what you remember, from what you know, once they moved to the Lower East Side and then up to Harlem and the Bronx, were they active politically throughout all of that time?
Yeah, my grandfather was always very active, and all his children, or most of them anyway, I think the older ones, were very political. As I said, my aunt, so she was second to my father. She was the second child. She was Mark Antonio's secretary. Her husband was Mark Antonio's Spanish interpreter.
Wow.
And that was the way it was until he died young. And my father was very good friends with him, so he was a big part of our family.
So
But
do you remember Mark Antonio coming to your apartment on a
no,
no.
because I don't know what year he died, but I would have been very young, because
Sure.
he might have died in 1952, which would have made me 5 years old.
Yeah.
So I don't remember him, but my father always had very, very strong feelings about him.
Yeah, it was the early 50s. I forget,
Yeah,
52, 51, 50,
yeah,
but something
yeah.
like that.
Because by the time I was aware of him, and I was very young, so I didn't really understand, he was already gone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, and uh, what about your grandfather's involvement in the Jewelers Union? Do you know much about that?
Well, I know that he was one of the leaders, and then when the House Un-American Activities went into effect, they, from what I understood, they stopped all lefties from being in the heads of unions. And so I don't really know much about it, except that I know that he was no longer in that high position.
Mm,
But again, I was very young when all this was going on,
yeah,
and I guess because of the times, it wasn't talked about too much.
sure,
It
sure.
was more finding out as I got older what the situation
And he had to have been at least somewhat near retirement
was.
at that point.
Yeah.
Imagine, but yeah. And your grandmother took care of all of the children primarily, or was she a?
No, she wasn't an activist. She, I don't remember anything. She was a character. She had a great personality, and she was open-minded. But I really don't think she ever participated in any kind of, political activities besides going along with him.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, both of them were pretty involved in like the avant-garde art scene. Is that right?
My parents.
Your parents. Ah, okay,
My
okay.
parents. Yeah.
Your parents. Okay, so we'll
Yeah.
get to them in a second
Yeah.
here. What about any of your aunts or uncles or extended family? Any particular information that you'd like to share about them?
Uh, well, I think I mentioned to you that I know my Aunt Annie had a lot to do with keeping the Winstons in their apartment when they tried to evict them. Um, that's what Larry told me, which was Judy's older brother.
Yeah.
But I can't think of anything in particular.
Yeah, and how many of them still lived in the Coops?
Okay, so, well, what you mean when I was born?
Or when you were growing up? Yeah.
Okay, so when I was born, they were all there.
Okay.
And then one aunt moved to a house 2 blocks away, 3 blocks away, and one of the uncles moved to a house a few blocks away. And then I guess when I was 5, my father's youngest brother moved to Florida. So,
I see.
but other than that, my father, my Aunt Annie, my Aunt Esther, so that was the 3. They were still in the Coops as I grew up till I was about 18.
Okay, I see. And did your parents live in the Coops uh, beyond that point, or did they eventually move out too?
Uh, my father had gotten an old church up in Cahonkson,
Mm,
and at some point they moved up there, which was very hard because that's not really good it was a 1700 church.
wow.
And yeah, so it wasn't really very insulated. And once they got older, they couldn't really take care of it. So my father, he died up there, and then I got my mother back down here.
Sure.
And so Reg and I took over taking care of the house and painting
Sure.
there. Yeah, because it was a big, sunny, very, very airy, very spacious, which was great for our paintings because they were large.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So about your parents now, why don't you share a little bit about them, what they did,
Okay.
kind of, what kinds of things you remember about them, whatever you'd like to share about your parents.
Okay. Well, I know my father was politically active during his youth. They all were. But I don't remember that. I guess Mark Antonio was probably his last connection with politics as far as that went. So my father and his youngest brother did hat concessions. So they would go to the different states, which is where I found out about not being accepted. He had to use the name Moore. He couldn't use the name Eisenman because he would go to all the different state capitals. And they would sew names on hats. That's what they did. They would have different stands, and they would have trucks. And my father would park his big red trucks outside of Joe Tuckman's, which is how I would know that he was home again.
Sure.
And that's pretty much what he did. Even though he was in the plumbers union, he didn't like working as a plumber. So that's what he did. And he liked to be free. And my mother would go with him during the summertime and help him, and my sister and all my cousins. I mean, he got everybody working in affairs. And I worked in the World's Fair. My first real job was in the World's Fair.
Sure.
Yep. and they worked in Expo. I mean, that was what he was Hat Man Harry. You know, I said he met Elvis, and he had a picture of Elvis, which somebody stole.
Oh,
Yeah, well, because during that time, in the early time of Elvis, they would always make hats according with what was going on in the world. So
sure.
they had Elvis hats. And so one day when I guess it was Tennessee, so he was from Tennessee, or where was he?
From Memphis,
Yeah, yeah,
Memphis, yeah.
yeah. So before he was in the army, he was walking through the fair and he stopped at the stand. And they had black and white pictures of Elvis that they would give out with their Elvis hats. And he said Elvis was so sweet. The next day he came back and he brought him an autographed photo.
Wow.
Yeah, which we had on the wall until someone stole it.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So one of my old friends, or not friends, because I had too many people that were walking in and out of the house, took it.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
So,
And I mentioned to you that we had a letter from Einstein, because when my father was in the Yiddish theater, and he liked to promote. My father was a big promoter, so he sent Einstein a letter inviting him to the show, which I have a picture of somewhere of all of them in the show. And Einstein was very nice and wrote back. So I have that faded letter somewhere in the house here.
wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, it really was. It really was. You know, and it means more all the time.
Yeah, so he was in Yiddish theater before he started working at the fairs then.
Yeah. Before my parents got married, he was with another woman, and during that time he was in the Yiddish theater, and then during the war he was in the Merchant Marines.
I see. Yeah,
So,
yeah. And what about your mom? What was she doing before she met your father? And
oh, my mother was dancing and theater, and she was the oldest of 9 children.
wow.
The oldest daughter, excuse me, the oldest daughter.
Yeah.
So she had 2 older brothers, one more, but he died very young.
Mm,
And she was the oldest of 5 daughters.
wow.
And she was an artist. I remember my aunt saying she would wake up and my mother would be drawing them. And she danced, and she was a very interesting character. She was very she loved culture. So
Yeah.
she would, my cousin said she bought her first Broadway play tickets, and my cousins considered her their culture aunt, which was very nice. But yeah, and she worked with my father too. So she worked in Freedom Land.
Sure.
But he wasn't involved with that one, but she worked there. So she worked in the World's Fair. You know, she worked in Expo in Canada.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you know how they met?
In the village somewhere. I know I say these stories, right? From what I understand, my father was a very emotional character. And the woman he was with, she just couldn't take it. I mean, I had read so she was with someone else, and I guess he was rebound, and they got together. And my mother was getting older. It
Yeah.
wasn't. I mean, I wouldn't say it was a romantic situation,
Sure.
but she had. I don't know where it came. One of her sister after her committed suicide.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and she committed suicide
Mm.
with her baby, with her child.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and it had to do with, which, you know, again, I find this out later. My sister showed me a news clipping, and over the years got the story that she had gotten pregnant, and
Mm.
so she had to bring the child up Catholic to have a husband, and my mother's parents didn't accept this. They were religious. My father's family were not religious. My mother's family were more religious. So she came back, but she really had nowhere to turn. And she was helpless. And so
Yeah.
that was her out. You know, it was just
Wow.
a terrible thing. So I believe what happened was my mother promised my father that she would marry a Jewish man. So she found a highly unusual Jewish man in my father. And, you know, and that's how because I know my mother said that the woman's name was Rosalind, who he was with, Rosalind Simon. My father used her name also. But when she found out my mother was marrying him, she looked at her very pityingly. Like I said, my father's very emotional. He was very high strung. So Rosalind looked like she felt really sorry for my mother, that what she was getting into. But meanwhile, they were together 50-something years, so
Yeah.
they worked for them.
Yeah. And do you know much about your mother's family's history, where they came from?
They came from Romania.
Okay.
What she told me was Vaslui and Radikanan. My cousin, who's on that side, she never heard of Radikanan. She knew Vaslui. My cousin worked as a Russian translator, Russian and Chinese translator, my cousin Alan, for the State Department. And she helped getting the Jews out of Russia before the Soviet Union collapsed.
Sure.
She was very active with that. And she actually, I think she still works for the State Department.
Okay, wow.
She was a smarty.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So do you remember if there was any tension between your mother's side of the family and your father's side of the family? They not
No.
together very much, or they?
Well, my mother's family came from Brooklyn.
Sure.
And my father's family was here. There wasn't that much interaction besides when people would come over for holidays, because only two of her brothers, her oldest brother and her youngest brother, still lived in Brooklyn. And so with holidays, we would see each other. It was interesting because my cousin Alan said, that's the one I was talking about, the Russian translator.
Yeah.
She said, I would love to go to your house because there were so many interesting characters and nobody treated you like you were a child. You were spoken to as an equal. She said that I wasn't used to that. I was always used to being treated as a child.
Yeah.
So I thought that was quite lovely, because you get different perspectives when you talk to different people.
Definitely.
From your own perspective. I mean, my perspective was there was always a lot of noise in the house. My father always had his brothers and sisters over, and I could never go to sleep at night, and I never got enough sleep, so I wasn't a good student, So to me, it was quite different than what it looked like from other people's point of view. But,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So did you all celebrate any of the high holy days or anything like that with your mother's family, or?
I think it was more like Thanksgiving. No, we didn't.
Okay.
We really didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't meet my grandmother till I was 11 years old, so we went to California. So.
Okay, I see.
So that's when I met my grandmother, and then she died a few years later.
Sure.
But my mother told me the story of how my father was in the Merchant Marines. She had my sister. Now, my mother got married. She had my sister at 35 years old.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
Okay, so she was, she was a late bloomer there. And she went to live with her mother. So it was her mother and her sister, and her mother would shovel coal. Her mother totally spoiled her. She fed my sister. I think she said the only thing she had to do was feed my sister. She would shovel coal, and she would wash the clothes, and she did all the work. So my mother was a big princess. And then my father came to visit, and my mother very stupidly served him bacon. and that's when Grandma said, time to leave, Jane, time to go get your own place. And so she ruined the good thing by being oblivious. That was my mother. My mother was oblivious, which was good, and it was, she didn't see a lot. She just was in her own crazy little world. I mean, I adore her, but, I have to, you can only love somebody if you can see what they are and the truth of the matter. I can't really. But yeah, she was in her own world.
Yeah, absolutely. Did she keep up with dancing or any other kind of artistic expression when you were a child?
Well, she painted the whole time. She always painted. She would go to her classes, and she always was very interested in dance, and took us to see the Nutcracker, and watched all these very interesting things on television that I would watch with her. So I was exposed to that. She was a very open-minded person.
Mm.
She always said, children that are mixed are the most beautiful. They come out the most beautiful because they have all these good traits. So I thought that was interesting. She was lovely like that.
Yeah.
And and always doing something creative and artistic with us. Like I said,
Sure.
if it was raining out, we would make paper beads out of magazines, and that you
I
cut
remember you
them.
talking
Yeah,
about that.
yeah, you
Yeah.
cut them and then you roll them and you get all these beautiful patterns. And she taught all the seniors when she went to Florida for one season with my niece. She taught all the seniors there how to make them, and she had them all making these beads, even though nobody could speak English because everybody spoke Spanish. But
Yeah.
she had them doing all this and stringing them. But she was very good making dolls. She was quite a character. Yeah.
It sounds like it. Sounds like both of your parents were quite the
They
characters.
they really were. But they let us be who we were. They
Yeah.
let us develop to who we were. They didn't interfere too much with that.
Yeah. That's definitely remains a rare thing with most parents.
Yeah.
Sure. Um, did either of them speak Yiddish?
Well, my father, definitely. My father, he said he thought in Yiddish. I mean, he came here when he was 2
Yeah.
as a left-handed little boy. And so his teachers would hit him, and
Oh boy.
they were, yeah. But no, he always, with his mother, they always spoke in Yiddish. Oh, there's your phone.
Yeah. Let me just mute.
Go ahead.
It'll stop eventually. 1 second.
No, it's no problem.
It was actually Paul Jurgens
Oh,
who was, I guess, I wrote to him a few weeks back, and I guess he was calling back because he lives in Montreal now.
there was a Carl Jurgens. I think that was his older brother.
That's
He
right.
was married to Helen. Well, they were together. You have any contact with him, with Carl? I mean, I don't know if he's
Carl
still around.
passed. Um,
I'm not surprised.
yeah. Carl passed. I forget exactly when, but yeah.
Yeah.
Their father, Jimmy,
Hmm.
and Hartwell, his brother, they were both artists as well.
Hmm.
I don't know if you ever ran into them or.
I was too young for that. I think Reggie mentioned that. I knew Helen, though she was older than me. I had my daughter very young, so we hung out together, and she was friends with Marty. So who Marty Zucro was Al Wood's sister-in-law.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were close friends with Larry Morton. Paul might have some contact with him. I don't know, but it's possible. I
Yeah.
remember Paul. He was very. I mean, again, he was older than me, but I remember him as a very handsome
Yeah.
man. Yeah,
Yeah. Um, yeah. I'm trying to uh, remember. I think so. I haven't spoken with him yet, but I think he might be an anthropology professor now. But so I don't know if he.
Paul.
I think he might have done some art at some point too.
I think so. It's usually people continue that. It's something. Um, it's a way of expressing.
Absolutely.
It,
Absolutely.
yeah, without words, it comes through.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we'll get more into Reg
Yeah,
in a little bit, but I mean, um, just the amount of artists at the Coops is, um, I don't think you'd find that in a
I don't
regular
think so either. I
complex.
don't think. I remember Larry Morton saying to me, this goes back a long time ago, saying there are more PhDs that came out of the Coops than anywhere in the United States.
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, and then artists too, and I mean,
And music.
explosion of culture.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, we'll get more into art in a little bit. to get back to your parents and you growing up. What kinds of things do you remember your parents listening to, either on the radio or records?
You know, it's funny you asked me that, and I mean, I think it was pretty much all kinds of music. I don't recall anything in particular. I know I had all these records from, you know, those old war records that were in paper. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't think I've seen those before, no.
Oh goodness, I wish I had kept them, but they were made out of cardboard, the
Mm,
children's records, and you would
wow.
play them. Yeah, it was really funny. And I know we had ropes and records, but you know, I really, that somehow doesn't, I don't remember anything in particular, just everything. We had an old a radio that would thump on the ground, and then of course we got better stuff.
Sure.
Um, but you know, that I don't remember. I know you asked me about food the other day, and I said my father liked to make spaghetti and meatballs, but then I remembered, okay, so they made stuffed cabbage, and my mother had chopped liver, and I never liked meat, so
Yeah.
she made very good beef stew, but I really didn't like the meat, so I would shred it. I
Mm,
just liked it with
yeah, yeah.
gravy, you know. I really didn't like the meat. I had to disguise it. But then in my teen years, my father learned how to make paella.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he had his own paella pots because one of the women that worked for him were from Spain. So of course he has to learn how to do this. My father loved to cook.
Yeah.
So so he was a paella maker.
Wow. Yeah, I think Melissa mentioned that there was, I forget his name. I'd have to go back and watch the oral history again, but she mentioned that there was an old kind of uh Spanish veteran from the Spanish Civil War who lived at the Coops. I'm wondering if your father knew him. I don't remember his name, but
Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, in Wingdale, there were connections with the Spanish Civil War.
okay, I see.
So I knew that, and I know my cousin Danny, who was the Mark Antonio's. Um, his parents were the ones that worked for Mark Antonio,
Sure.
so his name was Danny for Danny O'Toole, which was one of our friends whose husband died in the Spanish Civil War.
I see. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I had friends again from Camp Unity, whose father his name was George Chaikin. I don't know if you've ever heard the name, but he was actually George Chaikin himself. The one I knew was a very fine sculptor. He's actually known worldwide. I wish I had known that before. But his father was also in the Spanish Civil War,
Oh,
who
wow.
was also George Chaikin.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that was interesting. He was a very interesting person that I connected with. I always felt a very big spiritual connection to.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And so the two camps you went to were Camp Wingdale and Camp
Well,
Unity?
Camp Unity became
Camp Unity.
Wingdale,
Oh,
became
okay. That
Wingdale
became
on the Lake.
Wingdale.
And okay. And then when I went to the children's camp, it became Camp Calumet
Okay, I
because
see.
it became just a children's camp. But there was still a lot of politics going on, and that's really where I started hearing about politics. I was 11 years old,
Sure.
and that was where I started learning about that. Um, and hearing, I mean, there really was not much talk
I see.
when I was growing up. You know, I remember my father, he had done a painting where he took Spanish newspapers and he made a Fidel Castro out of the newspaper.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, with painting, and he posted that. It was interesting. I mean, I don't have it, but it was an interesting thing. And that was in the beginning when they had a lot of hope that Fidel would be doing something good. And he did some good,
Sure.
you know, even though he's looked at with disdain. I mean, from what I understand, a teacher actually had told me this, not in Wingdale either, that there was like 98% illiteracy in Cuba.
Yeah.
And he said, everyone is responsible for teaching whatever they know to their neighbor.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard that. I've heard about
And
that.
pretty much wiped out illiteracy. I mean, what a nice thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The healthcare system now certainly seems pretty good from my standpoint too.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
US.
I mean, I remember when one of Reggie's aides was wanting to be a doctor. And I had heard that in Cuba, if you go there, they would train you for nothing.
Yeah,
You could become a doctor.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's unheard of. I mean, how wonderful.
I know, I know.
Yeah. So,
Um, yeah, I mean, uh, I'm sure the whole McCarthy era kind of, silenced a lot of
yeah,
the political discussion around the coups, especially.
especially.
Um,
Everybody was afraid.
do you remember your family being under surveillance at any point?
Not my parents,
Sure.
but I know my cousin Danny said his parents were,
Yeah.
because his brother ended up not so good. His brother's actually name was Richard Mark Antonio.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, when I said, that he grew up in a very different time than Danny did, because Danny was born in 43, and which he was younger than me. And he said, you're right. It was a very paranoid time,
Yeah.
and their phones were bugged, and so he grew up kind of messed up,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
paranoid. Then of course the '60s drug scene didn't help
For sure. For sure. Did the drugs hit the coops in the 60s
any.
pretty
Yeah,
much immediately?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I said my sister.
Yeah.
Saying this, but yeah, my sister's husband was from Arthur Avenue and brought it right with him.
Yeah.
And then there was, I don't know if anybody ever mentioned the ROT, the gang that was around here.
No. I haven't.
Well, it was a nasty, nasty. The ROT, and where did they get the term from? From the Nazis,
Oh, God.
the reign of terror.
Oh, so yeah, actually, maybe you mentioned that the first time
I
we
might
talked.
have,
I remember vaguely
yeah.
that, or actually, no, there was
It was
another.
somebody else. Ron, I know Norris, so it had asked me a lot about it back there. Norris Burroughs had asked me a
Yeah,
lot about that.
there was another gang that had a Nazi name too elsewhere in the Bronx. I was thinking of that one, but that's terrible.
Yeah, but here was the reign of terror.
Here was the rain. Okay, I see.
Yeah.
It was neighborhood kids.
It was not from the Coops, yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I mean, maybe like one, like Bobby Lawler, but other than that, no, it was from, from the neighborhood a few blocks away. And they took over. They actually had even a club downstairs. I don't know how they managed to get the management to give them a club, but they got themselves a club, which was crazy. Nobody had clubs. Yeah, it was crazy.
So that was in what, the 50s, 60s?
Let me see. That would have been the early 60s.
The early 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So mostly some of the maybe Italian kids from the
Uh-huh. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I mentioned to you that Reggie said that they had a club, that the black guys here he got them a club, and um, they had a piano, and he was doing paintings on the walls. And then one day they went there, and the Italian guys from way back there had gone and busted in and broke the piano up and destroyed everything.
Yeah. Wow. And yeah, that was the Carmen Jones Club.
Is that what it was called? That makes sense. Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, because Tommy Warner mentioned that club, and he said, the young black men, I guess it was probably maybe teenagers too, but also he would have been in his 20s at the time. They didn't have a club and no space of their own, so that he and Reggie and maybe Chuck Turner was involved. There were a few of the guys who were friends that were involved and stood up in a meeting.
Yeah, that's what Reggie told me.
Yeah,
and fought for it, and they got it, and then they had it for a while, and then they decided that they needed to put the young Jewish teenage girls in with them, and of course that meant it was going to be destroyed.
Absolutely. Yeah.
because it was not going to be appreciated, even though there was a thing of tolerance, there still was fear and intolerance going on. So, of
Yeah.
course, that wasn't allowed. Yeah, yes,
And
unfortunately.
I imagine a lot of that was when you were still pretty young.
I wasn't born.
Okay, that was all before you were born, huh?
Yeah, that was before I
Um,
was
yeah, yeah. And were there any clubs left still when you were growing up?
born. Well, there was some some guys had one club that was like weightlifting thing. And
Ah,
then they had two shows going on, two Jewish, the young
sure.
ones and the older ones. And then they had the auditorium, which I told you we would have very big dinners there.
Yeah,
That all the women in the neighborhood, in the coops would cook
yeah.
and serve these fantastic dinners for almost nothing and bazaars. And that's where we danced with the Seagull.
Ah, okay, okay. Yeah,
And
yeah.
there was a
Yeah, that's right.
piano, and yeah,
And
that, yeah.
did Edith Siegel live in the Coops too, or she came
No,
from outside?
Edith Seagull came from from Brooklyn Heights.
Okay.
But I remember my father saying that as a teenager, they had lost their dance teacher. And they met her in the park. So I don't know if it was this park or downtown.
Some,
And,
yeah.
and that's how she ended up as the dance teacher here.
Wow. What kinds of dancing would she teach? Folk dancing?
It was folk dancing. It was world dancing. So
Sure.
that's what my cousin actually has her children's books, and
Oh, wow.
both of us still remember the poems from.
Yeah.
So did you ever? Okay. So I met a little girl. She came from another land. I couldn't speak her language, but I took her by the hand. We danced together, had so much fun. Dancing is a language you can speak to anyone.
Oh, wow. I like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
She was wonderful. And I say her later book, and I mentioned this to you, we spoke the last time, that she dedicated to all the lovers and rebels.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And that made a big impression on me, the realization of having to be a rebel to be a lover.
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely.
And you
Um,
can't accept what, yeah.
yeah. If you yourself are conforming to everything, then you expect everyone in your life to conform to your expectations as well.
Yeah.
And that's not love.
No, you have to see what is. You have to,
Yeah,
and yeah, or to like to bring it to now, to see all the children that are being put in detention as your own. I
yeah.
mean,
Absolutely. Yeah, I forget the exact phrase, but in 1945, I think December 1945, I read this. It was a reprint that I read yesterday on, Holocaust Remembrance Day. It was a reprint of a article printed in the Daily Worker, and someone who'd been uh, a part of a unit that went into Dachau, I think. And there was a line in there where he said, fascism didn't hit Germany in one fell swoop. It was a series of small compromises with evil that built up into this monstrous thing. And
absolutely.
yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, it's accepting it as it's coming in, and not recognizing it. Well, it can do, like it can't happen here. Well,
yeah.
hello.
Hello. I mean,
Yeah.
the just how quickly people have forgotten and continue to forget the children put in cages at the border. Like, it blows my mind.
It
But
blows my mind too. I mean, I can't stand it. The
yeah,
idea, I mean, I think of my own daughter, the idea, how anybody could tolerate it, how anybody could vote for anybody that would do this.
yeah,
It's beyond me. I can't.
I know. I
Yeah,
know.
yeah. I can't bear it.
Yeah, I mean, did were there any family members on your mother or father's side that were in Europe during the
I
war?
don't,
Or?
I don't know.
Okay.
Um, I know one of my father's sisters, my grandfather's sisters, my cousin thought that she and another one remained in Russia, but I have a photo that was taken here, so we know that's not the case.
Yeah.
So she obviously died before that was Tamar was aware of her. But I know with my grandmother, so on my grandmother's side, she had one sister that they never knew what happened to her. And for some reason, they always figured, well, she was taken into white slavery.
Yeah.
And then when my grandmother, pretty much close to when she died, found out she was actually living in South America.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we have, well, she wouldn't have been an Eisenman, she would have been a Gerstein.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
but somewhere there. And so, you know, we're all so connected. It's so crazy. I mean, when I hear there was one person in South America whose last name, you know, one of the heads, this goes back years now, was an Eisenman. I said, oh, it must be related. There's
Yeah.
not that many Eisenmans.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there are other names, yes, but like Eisenberg is a very common name. Eisenman's not a common name.
Yeah.
So, you know, it all breaks up. Like one of my mother's sisters, well, actually cousins, said some of the people ended up in Canada,
Yeah.
and some of the people ended up in the United States.
Sure.
This is on both sides.
Sure.
It all depended where the boat was going.
Yeah, absolutely.
We had no say.
I know. You just got on and hoped for the best.
Yeah. I imagine what a tragedy that must have been.
Yeah.
Making a trip like that. But no, my grandmother, I never spoke to her about, you know, the trips. Or I mean, she died when I was about 19, I guess 20.
Yeah.
Then I took over the apartment.
Yeah. Yeah. And is that the apartment you're in now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the original.
Wow. Wow. And which section and?
Okay. So this is the first court. So,
yeah. Court. Okay.
Right.
Right.
So that, to me, it was the nicest. It was built when they had the most money.
Yeah.
And has the nicest architecture. But it's the first building, so it overlooks the playground and inside the courtyard. It's a lovely apartment. I mean, I couldn't duplicate it.
Sure.
So.
And what do you remember about playing around the coops when you were growing up?
Well, again, I was not a wild child as far as that, as for when I was young.
Yeah.
I like to draw. You know, I like to dance. I thought I should tap dance to school. My mother didn't let me take tap. I had to take modern because she thought tap was old fashioned.
Sure.
I tell you, my mother was the character, right? And I said, actually, my cousin has pictures of it too. But I was saying that when I posted a picture of dancing with Ida Siegel, and what I was told by Brenda was Carnegie Hall, and found out later that it was for Robeson.
Yeah, yeah.
And she said she had picture of herself as a swan. And when I mentioned it to my cousin Estelle, she said she also has pictures, and they were the bees and flowers because that was my sister's group. So they were bees and flowers. So that was, Edith was very, very, very original. You know,
Yeah. Aside from that performance, did you ever see Paul Robeson at the Coops?
No. You know, he left this country I was probably 7 years old, 6 years old. I was very young.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned that Judy said he was at her house, but you know, that's because she had that connection with the father.
Yeah.
But no, I don't remember him there. I mean, he was talked a lot about in camp, but he was already out of the United States.
For sure.
You know, and one of my friends, one of my mother's friends, said they had gone to his concert in Poughkeepsie, was it? Peekskill, right? And when their bus was attacked when they were leaving.
Yeah. I mean,
right here in New York.
I know. There's still, you know, there's some footage of it and some pictures, and oh my goodness, I mean, yeah.
Really, really terrible, really terrible. And then he did that last concert at the Canadian border.
Yeah, that I remember reading about that, and
Yeah.
yeah, the U.S. authorities weren't too pleased, but they couldn't do anything.
Well, they weren't pleased because they couldn't get him to get involved with getting Black people to sign up for the war.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why they got angry with him,
Yeah,
because he said, we're not free here. I can't do that.
yeah, yeah. I know. Yeah, and he's definitely one of the many Black leaders that was the full force of the federal government was arrayed against him.
Full force. People don't even know him. People that consider themselves, well, not that grew up here, but, that
Yeah,
considered themselves, educated Black women that understood the history, never heard of him.
yeah.
I was amazed when I was working in the health store talking to different friends. And never heard of him, never knew anything about him. So he was pretty much erased from memory.
I know. Him, I mean, even to a certain extent, W.B. Du Bois. I mean, people just remember him for some of his early work, but when he became increasingly radical, he was always pretty radical to begin with, but when he became even more so, everyone disowned him, and most people don't know that period of his life at all.
Right. Well, that's why even they say about Martin Luther King, that he's depicted as Santa Claus
Yeah,
rather than, what he was really about.
absolutely. Calling for the end of the Vietnam War, calling for the end of capitalism. I mean,
Yeah, calling for a guaranteed income. That
yeah,
was his last fight, and that nobody knows that. That's
I
like,
know.
well, I'm not going to say nobody, but standard normal people don't never heard this. It's not something that's spoken about. But he
Absolutely.
was talking about this way back.
I know. I know. I
Yeah.
know. But yeah, and as far as speaking of these uh civil rights, Black liberation leaders that are hounded by the US government, do you remember ever seeing Henry Winston after he got out of prison?
Well, yes, I did, because I was friends with Judy, and at some point I was going with her brother. So we would go to visit him, and we went up to his house in Peekskill. And so, yeah, but he was an older man already. But
Sure.
yeah, but yeah.
Do you remember anything in particular about him, or any stories or anecdotes with him? I think he only lived at the Coops for a few weeks, like I think 3 weeks, and then right after he got out of prison, and then he spent some time in the Soviet Union. But yeah, since his family lived at the Coops, I'm kind of treating him as associated with the Coops.
Well, he was associated with the Coops,
Yeah,
but but his mother, his wife lived here, and Judy and Larry lived here.
yeah,
But he was always a presence. There was a presence of who he was that was always there. But I don't remember him actually being in the Coops besides
sure.
seeing him when he lived in Harlem.
Sure. Yeah. And uh, what about other either
Well,
black?
Carl Lee.
Oh yeah,
So Carl Lee and Reg were good friends. I said that Reg said they went to Unity together, and they would go to parties where Canada Lee had all his big shot friends. And he said, but he would drive a great car, and he would be stopped by the cops.
yeah.
Canada Lee. But then Reg said that they went to Unity together, and they got in trouble in the car, and they threw him out because they would throw Carl out.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Carl was a big shot.
So they threw Reg out instead, huh?
Yeah.
uh, um,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, and Carl Lee died very young too, I think, right?
Wasn't that young.
Maybe not that young, huh?
I think he was probably in the 70s.
Oh, okay.
But
Yeah.
because Reg had met him over the years, he had met him downtown, because Reg was in the Garment Workers Union.
Oh, okay.
So at one point he had an art studio downtown, with actually a few of them with a friend of his, with a woman. But he met Carl. I remember him telling me the last time. Carl kind of like laughed at him being a working class hero. Telling Reggie.
That's
Yeah, yeah,
because Reg was in a union and Carl probably
yeah.
never really.
No,
I'm sure he just did what he had to do to.
they did a few movies. He got
Yeah.
some parts because of who he was, but his addiction kept him from ever doing anything.
Yeah.
Reggie said the best thing he ever saw him do was when he played a junkie. I think it was on Broadway and Reg had gone to see him, and he was stoned out in the
Yeah.
back. So
Yeah. Oh, that's sad.
yeah, and then I looked him up one day, and I realized that he had passed, but he was pretty old already. So he
Yeah.
managed this. Must have been strong genes that kept him around.
I guess so. I guess so. But yeah. So I mean, Canada Lee, of course, was in the Coops. But did you know that Robert Earl Jones, James Earl Jones, his father, lived in the Coops for a little bit?
No, I didn't know that. That's fascinating. I love it. I love it. And I know
Yeah.
Shelley Winters had a lot to do with it, that whole thing with in Wingdale, that she was, known to have been there. And
Yeah.
I don't know if I mentioned to you that watching TCM one day, and they talked about Judy Holliday,
Ah.
and that she was called in front of the House Un-American Activities. And what Mankiewicz said was, and she gave the performance of her lifetime as a dumb blonde.
Oh my God.
Oh, that was terrific.
That is terrific. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're getting all over the subject here, but yeah.
Oh no, that's fine. That's fine. I mean,
Good.
so much. I feel like more comes out naturally that way anyway. So,
Yeah.
but but yeah. Do you remember either through through Reg talking about it or your own memories, other Black families or interracial families in the Coops?
Well, I said that George was, and when I mentioned Larry Morton, okay, so Larry Morton's mother was very political, and she married Reggie's cousin.
Mm,
So in other words, Larry was white, but his father, who was his stepfather, but his father was Black. And
sure.
so he grew up as that, and I remember hearing, I was so young, my sisters and my cousins, oh, Larry's father's Black. I mean, Larry was blonde, as Judy Winston's daughter was blonde,
Yeah.
very blonde, because her mother was blonde. But I think he'd be interesting because, I mean, the connection, I don't know. I don't know, I don't know who's alive anymore. I don't know.
Yeah. So it wasn't just Reg's family who lived in, or Reg's immediate family. He had an aunt or uncle, or I guess an uncle.
Well, this was his cousin.
His cousin. Okay.
His cousin was Larry's father.
His cousin was Larry's father.
Because Reggie's son was a year younger than me.
I see. Yeah.
So, it takes in I get a lot of history from him. But yeah, Reggie's family's all of them lived here for at least some time.
Sure. And what was their last name again?
Smith.
Smith. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing that in the census, from the census records. But when I first saw it, I had no idea who Reggie Smith was.
Well, he was Milton Smith.
Milton Smith. That's right. Milton Smith, and Reggie was the nickname.
He gave himself that name. He said that was his art name. But I always knew him as Reggie.
Yeah. Sure. So I think we'll come back to Reggie in a bit, but just to get more about your childhood, do you remember the specific elementary and junior high and high schools that you went to?
Yeah, I went to 96 and 135 in Columbus.
Yeah, that's pretty much a standard answer, but
yeah,
there's a little variation with high schools sometimes, but
yeah, well, because some people went to music and art, and
yeah.
But and before my generation, it would have been 113 before
Sure.
135 was built.
Sure.
But yeah, and the dividing line for Evander was Arno Avenue, so that's where the Coops ended. That's where
Ah,
projects began. That
yeah,
went all the way up, all the way up. So it was kind of like it. It was a segregation thing, obviously. You know, every
yeah,
one of the projects went to Evander.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think um, Tommy Warner, anyway, who was born, I guess, 1930.
Hmm.
He went to Evander, but I think
Yep.
it might have been because he was, well, there might be more of a story to this, but I know he was uh, uh, really like sought after for a particular sport. I don't remember if it was track or uh,
Uh-huh.
football or
Yeah, they had a big football thing. I know Reggie went to Evander too. I mean, he didn't go
ah,
very long, but he also went to Evander. So it might have been during that time. I don't know
yeah,
why.
yeah, 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 um, and as far as your elementary school goes, uh, how was your experience there?
Ugh. I don't know. You know, it's so weird. Um, I said I had one teacher that was just horrible in the first grade, which is never a good beginning.
Never.
No, and my parents weren't very. They were very smart. They read all the time, but they didn't have any education.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So they didn't push school too much. They didn't support that as
Sure.
much as my other aunts did. You know, my other uncles. For some reason they didn't. And as I say, my father always had people over, so there was always all this noise going on, and I
Yeah.
couldn't go to sleep. And so it wasn't the most productive way of going to school. But it was. I was never much there.
Yeah.
I became smarter at the end.
Mm,
You know, in high school when I could learn how to control myself.
sure, sure, sure. Do you remember in elementary school anyway, the teachers ever um, discriminating against either the handful of black children that were in classes or the Jewish children who were in the
There
classes?
were very few black children,
Sure. Yeah.
very few.
Yeah.
Um, it was mostly Jewish and I guess Catholic.
Yeah.
Um, I I assumed speaking to one person, and she was saying about Prendergast, that the first grade teacher, and that she would yell at me and scream at me till I cried, and then make me kiss her and say I'm sorry.
Oh.
And her face would be plastered with this powder that I
Oh.
would smell makeup. My mother never wore makeup, so I wasn't used to kissing a cheek with makeup on it. So
Yeah.
that was kind of nasty. She was very nasty. But then this person, Nancy, said she only liked the popular kids, and she mentioned who she thought was popular, and I realized that those were all non-Jews.
Yeah.
So I assume that was Prendergast's problem.
Yeah. 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 I would not be surprised at all.
Right. That's what I would assume
Yeah.
when she said it. She said Zachary and Arlene, and I'm saying, isn't that odd? Because I mean, I never thought of them as popular, so I didn't understand why Nancy thought they were popular.
Yeah.
But I that then suddenly made sense. And she would yell at my cousin Ira, who was Tamar's brother, because
Mm,
I thought of a few more. I forgot that they lived here too.
yeah.
Um, but he when she would yell at him, he wouldn't cry. He would laugh. She would get really mad, and the more she yelled, the more he would laugh, because that's how. When he was nervous, he would laugh.
Yeah.
So it was really kind of funny, yeah, the idea
Oh,
of it. But because to me, I would cry. I didn't understand how he could laugh. And he would just be hysterical laughing.
yeah. Yeah.
The more she would yell, the more he would just giggle up a storm. It was good.
Oh, that's funny. I'm sure she did not like that.
She didn't like it, but
Oh my goodness.
yeah.
And uh, what about in junior high school? Any teachers like that in junior high?
Well, not for me. My cousin, I don't know, she said it was I thought it was 96, but it might have been 135, where they had these Delaney cards. I don't remember those in 96.
Mm.
And the person said, "Oh, you lived over with those Pinkos."
Ah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
and I said I had that same experience with my first husband's family. You know,
That's right.
my daughters who were Italian and German and English. And I guess I was trying to be something I wasn't. So, so we were sitting at the table, and when the insurance man found out where I lived, he said, "Oh, you come from the communist houses." And I said, "What?"
Yeah,
I
that's,
said, "Yeah, the communist houses." And my mother-in-law said, "Yeah, that's what we called
I know, I know. That seems to be what people from around the Bronx called the Coops. But yeah, and you know, although there were definitely communists at the Coops, it also kind of overlooks there are a variety of uh, political positions.
them." Oh,
I imagine I haven't spoken with any, but I imagine some not even on the left. But
oh,
um,
definitely.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Definitely, because people were in the unions and they found out this was a good place to live. But I guess they had the printing press down there, and they did have a lot of political talk.
yeah,
And Reggie would say people would have their soapboxes and stand on their soapboxes.
yeah, yeah.
I, yeah. So yeah, yeah. But I was amazed when this was said to me. But that was a whole different world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
My mother-in-law used to say, Hitler had his reasons.
Wait, say that again?
Hitler had his reasons.
Oh yeah. Oh my God, that's terrible.
And she said it to me, but my father told me about the Holocaust when I was about 7 years old. He
Yeah,
sat me down and he told me all about it. So I've always been obsessed.
yeah,
But,
yeah.
but then there was a next daughter-in-law. I was already out of the family. And she said it to her. And her parents were survivors.
Oh my God.
And she cried.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
such a despicable thing to
yeah,
say, to
yeah,
think. I
yeah,
mean, yeah,
yeah. And then she would complain to me that her husband, Patty, had brought home a swastika, a blanket with a swastika on it from the war, and that she couldn't put it out, that she wasn't allowed to hang it up in the backyard. She complained about this to
oh my
me.
God. Wow.
Yeah, I had to get out of there.
Absolutely.
I couldn't,
Absolutely.
and you
Yeah.
know,
I mean,
it just I couldn't grow in that scene. So
no, no.
I had to go do it on my own.
Yeah. So, so that was your first marriage and you were relatively young at
Yeah.
that point?
Oh, I was only with him a few years.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then going back to your time in the public schools, did you play an instrument or participate in
Oh
any
yeah,
after
yeah.
school
I
programs?
was in the music classes, and
You're
there
in the
was a dance
classes?
class. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was always in the music class. At first, I took quarter, and then you took uh, clarinet. But then I had to have braces, so I had to stop playing clarinet. So I took violin. So I never was very good at that. And I took piano, and I took piano lessons from but that was from home.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And at that point, did the schools still loan out instruments to students to bring home?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
In fact, one time somebody was trying to teach me the violin because I was behind because when I started, and it was Friday, and we were there was a closed room that was where the instruments were kept,
Sure.
and we got locked in, and we were sure, and it was soundproof that room,
Oh no.
and we were sure that we were not going to get out. We were going to be locked in there all weekend, but we did get out. But yeah.
Oh wow, that's funny.
It was really weird because we were both kind of panicking.
Yeah. How did you eventually get out?
I don't remember. I guess somebody saw us through the window,
Yeah, yeah.
trying to bang on the door, getting attention.
That's
Uh,
funny.
yeah, it was kind of spooky.
Uh,
I'm a bit claustrophobic.
yeah, yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
And that
well,
sounds pretty
not a bit claustrophobic. I'm like a cat.
typical. Were there, was it still a very small number of Black students at the Coops
Very few,
Columbus?
very few. Oh, Columbus?
Yeah.
Well, once you get out of 130 of 96, 135 was a tremendous mix.
Oh, okay, okay. 135 already
It was
was
a tremendous mix.
a tremendous
Columbus,
point.
I don't really recall. I think it was probably still predominantly white.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, from what I mean, from what I think, you know, the way they had it districted, they would have City Islands or,
Yeah,
you know, Throgs Neck in Columbus. So you still had a predominantly white, though not like it was in 96.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I forget the name, but or I forget the number, I should say, but I guess maybe south of Pelham Parkway, I think is where it was, maybe still is. Brenda mentioned that there was an elementary school that was entirely white because the neighborhood associations kind of, you know, finagled things
Probably 49, I think it was
that
called.
way.
Yeah. Well, it's not surprising. I mean, when I worked, because I worked, that's where I worked. I worked at Goody Natural. That was over
Yeah,
on Parkway. The neighborhood started changing, and the few Jewish people that were left were old,
yeah,
couldn't leave, and they were constantly being pickpocketed
yeah, yeah.
because people would come to the neighborhood to pickpocket. I
Sure.
mean, it was really horrible. But then it started, then because of Bronx House, they started bringing in a lot of Russian Jews.
Yeah,
So you would have one street that was all Russian Jews, another street that was all Albanian, another street that was all Pakistani. I mean, like each block had another group of people. It was really weird. You just get this. It was interesting. It was very interesting.
it's still kind of like that. I remember I was
Yeah.
walking uh, just a few years ago around that area because I used to live off Pelham Parkway, kind of, and uh, you know, there's the kind of Little Yemen that's
Yeah.
sprung up in the Bronx now, and you know, just right down, not too far from that is you know, really vibrant community from Bangladesh, and um, but yeah, and of course there's plenty of Albanians still in that area,
Oh yeah.
um, but but yeah, uh,
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. You know, one
yeah,
street, you know, across the street was all Albanians, and then the street was all the Jewish Russians.
yeah. I mean, 'cause
Very funny.
at least that part of the Bronx used to be, you know, probably what, like 90% Jews, like middle class too. I mean, the Coops was a working class community, but as far as Jews in the area went, from at least from what I know, it was a lot of professionals and you know, more white collar, except the Coops.
Right, right, right. Well, especially Pelham Parkway
Yeah,
was. I mean, that's where all the good stores were, all the nice stores. I mean, I can't believe it's the same neighborhood. You know, watching how it had changed, but they had nice stores to shop in.
yeah,
Yeah, nice houses. And Morris Park was all Italian. Of course, it's not anymore either. But they
yeah, yeah.
try hard to keep it that way.
Yeah. Um, did you all ever venture from the coops that far? I know it's really not that far, um, uh, but maybe as children it might seem further. Did you all ever go into that
Oh,
neighborhood
sure.
neighborhoods? Yeah.
Yeah, because people weren't afraid to move around at that point. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, you went wherever you went. And my parents were never very strict, so it wasn't like when I went to see my cousin. When I stayed with my cousin in Brooklyn, her mother wouldn't let me out of the front yard. I wasn't used to that. I was used to being able to move around and go where I wanted to go. That's,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Um, were there any parts of the Bronx that you would avoid because of at least, you know, the threat of anti-Semitism or
You know, I never thought of it.
yeah,
I never thought of it. Then one day with a cousin of mine, I guess it was in the Throgs Neck area, we had gone to a candy store. I was a young teenager, and there I felt it. But it really wasn't until I went around the fairgrounds with my father.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that was when I started to really see, like, and understand why he used the name Moore instead of using the name Eisen.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah, because they just didn't know Jews. And my sister, and my cousin Arthur, when they went to Florida, because my father would take us out of school and bring us to Florida for a month or two in winter. But I wasn't in school, and they were asked to take down their pants and show their tails.
Oh, wow. Wow. Oh,
Yeah,
boy.
yeah. Or some guy went in the fairgrounds talking to him, and he said, and I'm not going to use the term he used, but he said Jews and blacks, and he didn't use the term blacks, of course.
Yeah.
He said Jews and blacks are the same. They're just turned inside out.
Yeah. 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 I mean,
So I started to feel where people that stayed around this area, they really didn't feel that. It wasn't obvious, though. Reggie's son felt it.
yeah.
I mean, he was brought up by his grandmother, and he was referred to. This is what his wife told me, as the little Jewish boy.
Little Jewish boy. Yeah.
Because his mother was Jewish, but she
Yeah.
wasn't part of his life, and people would question him. So he felt it much more than I felt it. I didn't feel it, but I didn't have that to feel. I mean,
Yeah. 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 And I guess as far as anti-Semitism from Italians in the Bronx, it wasn't really until your in-laws, I guess, that you felt it from.
Well, no, it was present. It was there, with the ROT. It was there, but it was quiet.
Yeah.
I mean, they were in such control of the neighborhood. So
Black people were their immediate enemy, and then is that right? Or
they didn't really talk about it. I mean,
yeah.
they were busy killing cats,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
hanging cats in the park, and dragging them through the street on a rope, and
Okay.
pulling the heads off of pigeons.
Oh God.
That was their sport. Yeah, yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah, and it's so funny because when I'm on Facebook, and people, they don't remember that, but I remember it because it was so appalling to me. I mean,
Yeah.
I had to hang a cat. What kind of person would hang a cat?
I know. That's despicable. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was weird. It was a weird time.
Yeah. So when you were growing up, did you hang out at Bronx Park at all, or go to the zoo, botanical gardens, things like that?
Went to the park. Mostly it was playground. Mostly it was
Zimmerman
playground.
Playground, is that's the one near?
That's right across the
Right
street
across
from
the
me
street.
here. Yeah. But yeah, we went to the zoo. I mean, I have pictures of the zoo. I told you my daughter works at the zoo
That's right. Yeah, yeah,
in the accounting. It's the zoo, and it's nice, because they they're very happy with the change of administration because they've been very good to them.
yeah.
They reinstated the funding, the environmental issues, which is so
Absolutely.
important. I mean, it's amazing to me that people can separate that.
I know.
Not understand those friends of mine who I'm constantly having like I stopped talking for a while because I can't take it. But she's happy with the Democrats, but now she's not happy with Cuomo because the flu is everywhere. I mean, the COVID's everywhere.
Yeah.
But then she wrote today, I'm so sad about the pipeline. So many people are going to lose their jobs. So they destroy our environment. There's not going to be last thing you'd be worried about is that,
I know.
But not understanding the connection of the environment with everything. So that's very nice about her working in the zoo. You get that different kind of, like the person I worked for in Good and Natural, the person who owned the store,
Yeah.
he doesn't believe in global warming. Right.
Wow.
Now his grandmother was marching out of Austria as Hitler was marching in.
Wow.
But he still manages to separate himself from that.
Wow. And I think the assumption is if you're really into healthy eating and all of that you might be plugged into ecology, but yeah, that doesn't always have to be the case.
Not at all, not at all. Because that's what I say, Melissa Taylor,
Yeah.
so telling me the story, which I always knew of her mother and father, and finding out that they met each other in Camp Kinderland, which I didn't know, and then saying that about her mother's story, which I assume she told you, but how first they couldn't excel in school, and then they
Yeah,
couldn't, like one thing after the other, until finally they left, and the ones that remained were all murdered.
I know. I know. Yeah, her family, I mean, on her mother's side, just barely escaped the Holocaust.
And not all of them.
Yeah, not all of them. And then on her father's side, uh, the Taylors moved up to New York to begin with, because their uh, father's best friend was lynched in Abbeville, South Carolina. Um,
Ugh,
so on both sides of her family, the Holocaust on one side, the American form of fascism on the other side.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, yeah,
yeah. It's quite a history.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Uh, but yeah, so let's go ahead, unless there's something that occurs to you before this, let's go ahead and talk more about Reg. Is there anything else you'd like to say in what
Uh,
we've spoken about so far before we get to Reg?
I can't think of anything. I have to
Okay, yeah.
change
So
my position. I'm sitting on a stool.
yeah, yeah. So why don't you share a little bit about Reg? I mean, I'll have some specific questions, but first, whatever occurs to you to share about him, his, family history, if you know it, who he was, how you met, things along those lines, whatever occurs to you first, and then I'll ask you more.
Okay. Well, there were six of them, so he was the youngest. And what his sister said was their grandfather, so her mother's father, was German,
Mm,
which is why you see the light hair and the light eyes that he and his mother had, and one of his sisters had. The rest were all dark.
yeah,
And but I didn't know that. But they weren't allowed to marry at that time, so
sure.
that was not part of the equation. And they lived, I guess, around Arthur Avenue in that area
Okay.
till they moved to the Coops. So said he was 15. He was born 1926. So I guess the late 30s.
Yeah.
Um, and they all lived in the Coops at one point or another. His father was a mailman, but he painted.
His father painted too.
Yeah. He said his father would sit very quietly in the living room and paint. So there's different pictures, and small because he worked 40 years for the post office.
Yeah.
He brought up six kids. You don't have that much time to do anything like that. And telling me about growing up in the Coops and the atmosphere in the Coops. It was new. It was different. And then after his son was born, I guess he found himself in the village, and he went into business with this woman, and they sold like wood and metal wall sculptures.
Ah,
It was called Lilo's Originals. That was her name. Actually, her parents were they were the founders of Ruby Foods.
oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. So they were great. I mean, I have pictures of them, flying birds and all different things. She liked to do that. She traveled a lot. I gave him all kinds of drums from all over the world.
Sure.
And they had two factories, I think he said. And then they split. He came back to the Coops because his mother had a heart condition. His son was still young, teenager.
Yeah.
So he came back to the Coops, and for a brief moment, he was seeing my sister.
Ah, okay, okay.
So that's how I became aware of him.
Yeah.
But her ex-mother-in-law came racing up to the house screaming that she was seen kissing. Again, I'm going to say a black man. That's not the term that was used.
No. Yeah.
But that ended.
Yeah.
He ended it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's, the way he said it. And so I was always aware of him. I thought
Yeah.
he was a nice man. I liked him. He was very nice to my niece. He took her to the park and took pictures, and she adored him. And
Yeah.
so I always thought he was a very nice man. And we would see each other in the street, flirt, but that went on for years.
Yeah.
Yeah. One day, um, I was going with some other guy who my father really wanted me to marry. And he was promising the world, promising a house, and business, and and bringing him all kinds of steaks, and cigars, yeah. And then I started going, Reggie. That was it, My Aunt Annie tried to convince me not to. Told me he had a bad reputation. I said, so do I. And I said, well, you know what? I have to feel the bells. I
Yeah.
don't feel I have to feel the bells.
Absolutely.
Very romantic here, I never was after money. I was just,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And what was the reaction of Reggie's family, your family, other people in the Coops to you all getting
Oh,
together?
well, the other people, everybody in the Coops, they were not happy. The women were not
What
happy.
did they say, or what were
Oh,
they happy about?
well, he was a very sexy man. I would say that he was very sexy looking. He was very appealing.
Yeah.
And suddenly, women that had ignored him his whole life just all of a sudden jumped to attention, run down the street after him, make all kinds of plays.
Yeah.
It was strange, and stop talking to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't nice. Some of it was kind of nasty, and but he was a very private person.
Yeah.
So he understood that we couldn't let anybody in.
Yeah.
So we kind of closed out everybody.
Sure.
As far as my family, he didn't want to get involved with them.
Yeah.
He felt that he had had problems with Jewish families in the past. And I guess his son's mother, his mother of the son his family was against them.
Yeah.
And so he didn't meet my family for a year, I believe.
Okay. Yeah.
Although everybody was talking.
Yeah.
Everybody
Yeah.
was talking. I mean, he had gone out with my uncle, my father's partner, his youngest brother.
Yeah.
Before they got together, she was going with Reggie, and she was
Mm.
very serious about him. She expected him to keep her poetry, and she wanted to make him into a doctor. You couldn't make Reggie into anything he didn't want to be. No way. He was not like that. He's very stubborn. You were not going to control him.
Yeah.
Wrong person. And I wasn't aware of it. Then one day I saw a picture of her. I said, that's my aunt. He said, really? Well, this is the history of them. Right after that, my aunt realized the connection. One of my aunts, one of my father's sisters, and told my father. But still, he didn't want anything to do with them.
Yeah.
We would go upstate. We would say my cousin had one of these geodesic domes that he had built.
Oh, wow.
And we would go stay there. This is the Mark Antonio connection, Danny.
Yeah.
And I tell you, he's a doctor working in Guam now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But we wouldn't stop there. He didn't want to have anything to do with my family until my father finally said, listen, I want to meet your fella. I've always accepted everybody. And then they became great friends. That was it. Once they met, understood each other, because my father tried to keep me, like I said, with this other guy. He wanted me to be with him. He didn't want me to leave my ex-husband.
Yeah.
He didn't understand it couldn't be.
Yeah.
And I couldn't really explain it.
Sure.
I remember saying to a friend of mine, well, it's political. I can't stay with him. It's political. And she said, but you don't go to demonstrations and things. But that's not politics. Politics is your gut.
Yeah.
How you feel about the world.
Sure.
So, yeah. So, but once that happened, then that was it. My father loved him. He was very good to my father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was something that, from what it sounds like that you said, was um, uh, not the typical experience that Reggie had had with white folks. Your family accepting him was a bit unusual for him.
Very,
Is that right?
very unusual, very unusual. And
Yeah.
my father's two sisters, the first time they met him, we were together upstate. Oh my God, they just they were they really flirted with him.
Um,
That
yeah.
happened. All women really flirted with him. I mean, it was unbearable. You know, it just if he wasn't such a person, um, I couldn't have dealt with it. But
Yeah.
he really felt, you know, you can only be with one woman at a time.
Yeah.
His basic statement was, the strongest man can't keep up with the weakest woman.
Mm.
That was his philosophy.
True.
So he you know, he appreciated women. He was very flirtatious. He would tip his hat, but that was it.
Yeah.
You know, but women thought he was in love with them.
Yeah. 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 It's funny that you mentioned that, because Melissa said there was a similar thing that went on with her father, and it would drive her mother insane. But that,
Yeah,
uh,
he was very warm. Bill was very warm.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah, he was also had a sexy quality about him.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
but but you know what? Ingrid flirted with Reggie too, so I don't want to hear it. She'd see us in the street and she'd holler, Reggie,
um,
and she knew me very well.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So
Oh
you
my
know,
goodness. So did the flirtation with Reggie, was that primarily white women in the Coops who did it, or all women?
oh no,
All women.
no. Well, the black women, I became the enemy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, I mean, even Brenda, who you know, I really didn't have too much to talk to her about. I mean, I knew her.
Yeah,
You know, she never seemed to be very approving of me to begin with. But
yeah.
then she was friends with this older woman, Alberta Whitney.
Mm.
And when Whitney saw us together, she went ballistic.
What did she say? Do you remember?
Well, yes. Okay. First she said, get away from her. We were walking into my building. Get away from her. You better get away. And she carried on. And then she said, let me see if I can do it perfectly. She said, you lent a book, she said to him, you borrowed a book from me years ago and you have to bring it back. And when you come up, what I'm going to do to you.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, so then sometimes they would sit outside the window here, Brenda and Alberta, and it was kind of weird. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
yeah, but then years later, you know, things pass.
Yeah,
And she had friended me on Facebook.
yeah,
Actually, she said Brenda Newman. I didn't have any idea who Brenda Newman was. I said, do I know you? And she said, oh, yeah, I was Brenda Beatty. I said, oh, okay, fine.
yeah, 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 yeah,
So that eased, you know. But and then I remember Reggie saying that she always kind of looked down on him. I mean,
yeah.
he was a bit wild, I guess, and so he felt she was a snob.
Mm.
And then at his sister's wake, whatever it is, it wasn't Catholic, but it was, you know.
Yeah,
Then she sat with him, and she was very warm. So, you know, we change, we grow.
yeah.
Hopefully, we're
Hopefully.
supposed to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure,
yeah. But
for sure. Yeah, what about the Taylors and the Dickersons? Did you and Reggie spend much time with them, or did you all know them too well?
well, no.
Yeah,
Charlotte, I knew. Her brother was my sister's friend.
yeah,
Um, but no, you know, sometime over the years, Charlotte had an attitude at one point, so there was no conversation.
yeah,
I mean, her father was very flirtatious. I mean, she's not going to see this, I'm hoping. But, you know,
yeah,
no, but her father, one day following me around in the car, was not nice.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
You know, I mean, I lived in the same court, so
yeah,
it wasn't very pleasant.
for sure.
But then when Angie died, and I told her how I felt about mothers, and that eased everything. That was warm. She was good friends with um, Lori Taylor, who was
Yeah,
from the first marriage of Bill,
that's right. Yeah.
and she came on to Reggie also very, very heavy. I mean,
Oh, I see.
ridiculously heavy. So we took years we didn't talk to each other, and then us too. When I was working downtown, when I was working over in the pen shop, we started talking on the bus, and we became friends. So, it passed, but she was not happy. She told him the first time she wore us together, she stopped. I was walking down the street with him, with my dog, and she came out and she just stopped and looked at us, bent over. She was struck. And I said, oh, she's going to come on to him. I mean, I could see it, And I walked in the store, and then right after that, he was talking to Steve one day, and she came running through the court screaming, oh, the sexiest man in the neighborhood.
Oh my,
I've been looking at you since I'm 2 years old.
oh my God.
All those years, nothing,
Yeah.
right? But all of a sudden, I guess you have to have imagination for yourself to see potential, but all of a sudden she was going to step in. So there was very little reason to mix.
Yeah. 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 And
I said he had a crazy effect.
what's that?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, okay. Say that again.
I said he had a crazy effect on women.
He had a crazy effect. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
On young women. I mean, it was his eyes. I don't know. Oh, those eyes. This is total strangers. Give me those eyes.
And they were blue, right?
Yeah, very blue and very big.
Yeah. And his hair was red. Red, is that right? Reddish?
Well, reddish. Yeah, it was light, and well, I mean, when I started going with him, he was already getting gray, but
yeah.
Yeah, his hair was light and red, and they called him Red.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you mentioned that he was he in the ILGWU or the Amalgamated Clothing Workers, which
The IW, the United
International Ladies.
Garmenter.
Was he still in that line of work when you met him?
Yeah, that's what he was doing when I met him.
Okay.
And he stayed there, and then when I was working in the health store, I got him to the health store for a while. And then when his son was almost murdered,
yeah,
he had to stop working because he couldn't continue working.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, he was just, it really took a toll. That was his only child.
Yeah.
And I remember one of his cousins saying to me, he carried him like he was fine china.
Yeah.
He carried Gary like he was fine china. So it was very devastating to him.
How old was Reg at the time, if you remember?
When Gary got attacked?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I guess he was young. He was maybe 62, 63.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after that, I'm sure it took him a while just to, kind of start functioning at all. But
well, yeah.
Was he doing art?
That's what we did. We would
yeah.
He would make the canvases. We would order canvas and boards, and he would put them together, and we would figure out the mathematics to get the most amount out of what we were getting. And then
yeah.
I had the house upstate already, so he would go up there during the weekends, or during the week actually. He'd come back and pick me up for the weekends, and then we would paint. And we would play guitar together and sing. And he liked a lot of show tunes, and I liked old folk music. And
yeah.
Yeah, I like Irish rebel music. I mean,
that's some good stuff.
I love it. I mean, my radios are set to FUV. Yeah, I love it. So we have a lot of music. I mean, he started to do classical music. He would play classical music by himself and try to get me to do that. That I didn't do too well. Yeah. But I like to play and I like to sing, so we would play guitar together and sing together. in between painting, we would sing.
Yeah.
Guitar.
Did both of you play guitar, or?
Yeah, yeah. Well, when we first got together, he had played guitar much more than I did. I never actually got to know how to even tune it without him helping me, but we would both play guitar. And then
Okay.
at one point, one guitar broke, and so he took my guitar. So then so then it wasn't more together. But most of the years we played together.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, it
So
was good.
like
It
guitar
was.
together, you'd paint together, you'd sculpt together, uh, kind of, and
We
every.
even worked on leather in the beginning.
What's that?
We worked with leather in the beginning before we started painting together. We started working with leather
Oh, okay.
and clay, and then we got to painting, and that was it. Once
Wow.
we started painting, it was. I said, my mother said to me once, don't ever take a lesson because it'll ruin your creativity. My
Yeah.
mother took lots of lessons. She had a lot of rules, and this Phil Oakes had a song, and he says there's a line that he says the rules will ruin the game.
Um, did either of you all have any artists that inspired you, or you mostly just worked from uh, kind of inspiration of the moment?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
really. Um, for a few minutes, we put on Bob Ross, and so then we started playing around with his technique. But of course, that immediately morphed into something else. If that wasn't going to stay like that, that was too restrictive too. But it gave you certain things that were interesting and that could be applied.
Yeah.
I told you my father was roomed with Siqueiros, so that was always very interesting. Before I got with Reggie, my parents went to Mexico and stayed in Cuernavaca with him and his wife.
Yeah.
And I have some terrible pictures because my mother didn't take care of them, so they're kind of stuck together. But
Yeah. Yeah.
them in Mexico with Siqueiros.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, in the art that you've showed me, your art and Reggie's art, there's, all kinds of styles that mix together. And I mean, at least in what I've seen from him, like more traditional, like indigenous African art that's mixed with like abstract expressionism and all kinds of.
And you could see jazz in it. I mean, I don't know if you looked on the Facebook, but all the pictures I posted. But yeah, no, we bounced off each other.
Yeah.
That was what was so interesting. And there was never any competition involved.
Yeah.
So people would want to compare, and I wouldn't let them.
For sure.
It was not allowed because that ruins it again. It had nothing to do with competition.
Just pure creativity.
Yeah, yeah. He was telling his story, and I was telling mine. This is how it came out. Nobody can tell your story. That's what I realized with painting.
Absolutely.
If I die, it goes with me. So this is my story, and everyone's got a story. The most boring person has a story.
Yeah. Did you all ever paint on any canvases together? Create joint paintings at all?
No,
Sure.
no. He told me to paint on his, but I would never do that.
Yeah.
I would never do that. No, it was. I would go to sleep. He would be painting, and I'd see a nice painting, but I had to work, so I couldn't stay up all the time when he was up.
Sure.
I mean, I had to sleep a little bit. So I would wake up and he had destroyed it, painted over it. And he always painted over paintings. He said, why did you do that? Why don't you just take another canvas? He said, well, we don't have room. He said, don't worry about it. So it'll, at one point, if there's no more room, it'll go out there. It'll be out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. When my cousin Danny came, we had a cousin that died. He came to pick me up with his new wife. He's got a new Chinese wife.
Mm.
And he was in Guam, and it was really strange because I texted him to tell him that, thinking he was in Guam, to tell him that my cousin had died, and he said, "I can't believe you did this. I just arrived. I just came into town."
Wow.
So he came over, and he hadn't seen the art in a long time, and he said, "This is as good as anywhere in the world. It's
Yeah.
really, and he said, this he's." And as he was talking about Reggie's thing, he said, this is really so symbolic of the history, of the whole Black history.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
it's here. I mean, it really should get out there because it was meant for the world. It wasn't meant for just us. I mean, it came through us, but it connected to the whole world.
Yeah, yeah. Have you ever showed the art to, anyone other than your friends and family or?
You know,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean, a friend of mine put a few pieces in a place, but they have never gotten out there, and they deserve to be out there. They should
yeah,
be out there.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, uh, there's a Bronx Museum of Arts. I mean, if we're definitely not an art museum, but I think it'd be so cool to do like a Coops artist exhibit,
Oh, it'd be great.
because
Yes.
Hartwell Jurgens, you can find a lot of his pieces online even. Jimmy Jurgens, I know he did like the Harlem Hospital murals for WPA.
Wow.
I'm sure he has other pieces, but between them and Reggie, I mean, I don't know if if Reggie kept any of his father's pieces.
I have a few little ones.
You have a few little ones, but
Mhm.
and I'm sure there's more that aren't occurring to me in the moment. But I mean, um, you are that's four alone right there.
Yeah.
And then you as well. I mean, displaying you and Reg's art together. I mean, there you could easily have an entire exhibit around it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I have one piece um, that my father did. And years ago, my cousin had said she wanted a piece. And I said, I want this other piece. And this piece had a swastika on it and a rat tail. And it was very symbolic. She took one that was more intellectual. But he didn't give it to me. He gave it to her. He didn't give it to me. And
Mm.
then towards the end of his life, he said, do you want this painting? He always remembered it. And I said, yes. So,
So you have that
so
too.
I have that painting. Yeah.
Wow. So you have your father's art.
Some
Art.
of my mother's, very little because they didn't take good care of it. It was upstate. It's very damp.
I'm sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I gave my sister a lot. I don't know what she still has and what she doesn't.
yeah. Do
So,
you have or did Reg have either of you have favorite pieces of either of yours?
yeah, of course. Of
Yeah,
course. I don't know what his favorites were. I know what my favorites were of his. I mean, I'm looking at them right now. And so they're in front of me. So you
yeah,
can't see them. But, and definitely, there were paintings that made me realize things, that,
sure.
you know, that it was interesting that one day I went outside and we were just early together. We had been painting, and I went out to the bagel place, okay, to buy some bagels at night. This is when I still would walk out at night.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I met my niece there, and she was hanging out with these kids. And one of them was Reggie's ex-girlfriend's son.
Okay. Yeah.
And I came back and I started to paint this painting. This is when I realized that it was really important to
Yeah.
what I was doing. And it was, I could show it to you one day, what painting it is, but because it's abstract, but it looks like to me like a Ferris wheel
Mm,
going up. And then when it comes down, it's just like your life. You
yeah.
can't turn it around. You can't change it.
Yeah.
It's an motion, and then it's down.
Yeah.
And I saw it so clearly in that painting. And then one day he was showing a friend of his who was an artist downtown. And he said, "Oh wow, that's amazing." And
Yeah.
he told, and because I had never explained to Reggie what I saw in that painting
Yeah.
or why it meant so much to me. I felt it was such an important piece. And his friend said, "Oh wow, that's like life. That's like the circle of." And I said, "Wow, see, he saw it. It was very interesting.
Yeah.
It was very interesting because I didn't know if anybody saw what I saw, but it was something that I felt so deep, and that's when I knew that what we were doing was important."
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, um, I think I I had a very hard time appreciating um, uh, painting, especially sculpture to a certain degree as well, until I was probably 22, 23, when I actually just took the time to finally sit down in front of pieces and let them speak, and
To
uh,
feel them.
to feel them. Yeah, and yeah, there's definitely something that at least the really profound art can express that words can never really capture in any meaningful sense. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I felt that when I had gone to saw the Mona Lisa when I was in Europe for a short time. Okay, I went there with my best friend. We met. We stayed together. The next year, she died
Mm.
on a bicycle going through Central Park when another bicycle hit her.
Oh boy.
But during that time, she had left earlier than me. I stayed for a few more days, and I was looking at the Mona Lisa, and I was so struck because her forehead was breathing to me.
Mm.
There was so much light
Yeah,
that I could feel her forehead like throbbing.
yeah, yeah.
And then behind me there was a woman, and she said, "Cheap claim to
um, um, oh boy,
fame."
yeah. I mean,
So,
it's like at the Museum of Modern Art. I've only been there a couple times because it's expensive to get in.
uh,
But I think there was a.
the tree.
I'm trying to remember which piece I was standing in front of. Um, I think it was a Matisse painting. The one with the three figures in a circle. I forget the name of it, uh, but it was on display, and I'd wanted to see it for a long time. I'd seen pictures of it, um, but I could never really connect with it because it was just such a constant stream of people coming with a selfie stick and standing in front of it and moving on, and it's yeah.
Yeah, there was a painting there, and I know the name. The artist was a big name, but it was like the tree of life, and it was all children interwoven into the tree.
Oh,
You
I
know,
I know that one. I can't think of the artist, but
that blew me away. That one is the one painting there that really struck me. That yeah, but it's all what you feel. I mean, when people say explain it, I mean, come on,
I
so
know.
it's what you feel. My uncle Harry, that was the Spanish interpreter.
Oh, sure, yeah,
So I show him the picture that I sent to you that Reggie did, the clay with
yeah,
the woman that's holding his stomach. And my uncle only saw sex.
yeah,
He only saw sex in my paintings. Only saw sex in Reggie's. And he said to me, "Why does he have breasts?" Which it's a she. Why
yeah.
does he have breasts, and why is he holding his penis? And I said, it's a woman, and she's pregnant, right? And then looking at my paintings, all he could see was sex. All he could see was he was disturbed.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
yeah. But that's all he could see. And so you're seeing yourself in a sense when you look at a painting. It's a reflection of yourself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's
absolutely.
funny. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Yeah, that one's what the name of that one is that Birth of the New, is that right? Or
Reggie's. That's what he always called it.
Birth of the New. Yeah, that one is stunning.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And he did that before we were together.
Oh wow. Yeah, yeah. I mean, once this virus is over, I'd love to see
Oh yeah.
have a tour of all of the art
Oh,
because
I would love you to. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Everything you've showed me, yeah, like just seeing it even on the screen, um, uh, like speaks to me more than a lot of the art that I've seen. Not that I'm an art connoisseur or anything, but
It's you know I hate when people think they know something. You know,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
yeah,
this guy who I work for, and he's telling me how I was saying about minimalism, how ridiculous it is.
yeah.
And I said, yeah, I was looking at something white on white. I mean, come on. And he said, oh, well, you don't understand. That's very mathematical. Like Oh, come on. What do you feel? Do you feel anything when you see a toilet on the wall? I mean, come on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, bubble gum on the floor. Come here, what are you talking about here? You
No, I
know,
know. I
so,
yeah.
you know, art is for the people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of the more contemporary art, I just have a very difficult time with.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. You know, it's ridiculous. What do
I,
you feel? What do you feel? What does it make you feel?
oh, absolutely. If I want to see commodities on display, I'll just go to a grocery store.
Yeah,
At least I can eat it then, you know.
yeah, right, right. No, it's, you know, it's political. I mean, it gets back to politics and who,
Yeah.
you know, you want me, you know, you want to tell me that a toilet posted on, you know, toilet bowl on the wall is art? I mean, get over it. You really feel something when you see that? I mean, my mother used to say that about Picasso's work. She said, I wouldn't want it on my wall. She said, it's disturbing. I
Yeah,
wouldn't
yeah,
want it on
yeah,
my wall.
yeah.
And I thought that was interesting, you know. I mean, I could appreciate Picasso. I don't know if you ever have you ever seen his erotic art?
I've never seen his erotic art. No.
But years ago, there was a publication that was called Avant Garde,
Mm,
and Reggie kept some of the, maybe a lot of it, maybe 12 I have,
yeah.
and one was all about Picasso's erotic art.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. Huh.
Yeah, which makes
Mhm.
sense. He was a Scorpio.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I have a bunch of Reggie's erotic art.
Sure.
He did a lot of pastels. Jackie, my daughter has them up in her room.
Okay,
Some
okay.
of them.
I see.
That's
Um,
why I call her room the sexy room.
that's funny. Uh, did I know you said that you and Reg's relationship was very much very intense and very, you know, closed in on yourselves. But uh did either you or Reg have any close friends in the Coops while y'all were together?
No, pretty much everybody was closed down.
Sure.
Everybody was closed down. It was just very tight, very. That's how he was anyway.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, when he
Um,
was outside, he was very sociable and very warm,
sure.
but he didn't want anybody around.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And he was right. I mean, looking at it, nothing would have been done,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah. Um,
and he didn't like intrigue.
sure. What about what year did you all get together? I forgot to ask that earlier.
Let me do math. So if I was 28, I was born in 47,
I'm doing the math too. Let's see.
I guess 75,
75.
74, 75.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Um, and do you remember Reg being very involved in the union? Um,
No.
I guess he was only in the union a handful more years after that.
Yeah, and um, he felt that you were not allowed to really express yourself in a union. Say, if you didn't like something that was happening in Israel, you couldn't
Yeah,
say, and that bothered him.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, there was a suppression that he didn't like.
yeah.
I mean, he was active when he was young. He said he went to all the May Day parades, and
Sure.
but um, I guess it was the time that bothered him.
Yeah, I mean, especially by that point in time, since most of the uh, left members of unions had been driven out of leadership positions, I think there was very much a stifling of that kind of culture
Yeah.
in the unions
Hmm.
and beyond the unions for that matter,
Yeah.
but definitely in the unions. Yeah, did did either Reg or you, before you got together, did uh, either of you participate in any of the pickets or protests around the Bronx?
No. I mean, I think once I went to one where Siegel was over by the, I don't even remember, it must have been a war protest.
Mm.
And I think he did. I know he went to the March on Washington,
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but
Um,
even there, he felt it was very controlled. He had, you know,
yeah,
there was a big
sure.
control thing, but he went there.
Yeah. And do you remember the White Castle
Oh
protest?
yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
And Geno's and all the guys with the guns in the cars.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, yeah. Did your family show up for it or
no,
no?
my parents did not get involved.
Yeah,
That was, my father when he was young, but no.
sure. That
Um,
was they would have been fairly old by that point anyway.
I think from what my father, from what I understood, I think actually my mother told me this about my father. So they were young communists,
Sure.
and his brothers. So he was at a party, and the woman left with the black guy, and he got mad, and he made a big fuss, and they threw him out of the party. So that came from my mother. My mother told me the story. So this was,
Oh,
history. Not, she wasn't there, but
I see, I see, I see.
so
Uh,
and I know that I know Mina told me that her grandmother and her father had a hard time. It was a party thing going on there too. I don't know if she's in there too.
yeah, we haven't set up a time to.
Oh, you haven't spoken to Mina yet.
We've spoken, but we just haven't done the interview itself.
Ah,
So, um, but yeah, I mean, in the late 40s, there's actually a series of articles in the Daily Worker about, at the time they called it white chauvinism, but we just call it racism now. But in the Allerton section specifically, so I guess they were clamping down on expressions of it in the Allerton section of the Communist Party in the late 40s, but I'm not sure what the situation was before that or after that, for that matter. But yeah,
yeah. But like I said, like with what happened with Reggie, I remember Edith, and that's the one I was talking about when I was saying my mother's friend that was with Robeson. She loved Robeson, but yet one time her daughter wanted me and Reggie to take over their apartment, which was United Coops, and the black thing was a problem for her. She didn't want, the association,
yeah,
the mix. So there was a lot of confusion,
sure,
people that had left Russia because of anti-Jewishness didn't understand the parallel.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's unfortunate.
I know. Yeah, 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 definitely, definitely. But I mean, it sounds like your family was able to create a space that made Reggie feel accepted, and at least your immediate family.
Yeah,
Uh, and um, and yeah, did
I
he
would
ever,
say my whole family.
your
Yeah.
whole family? Okay, your whole family. That's good. Um, did Reggie ever share with you what it was like being in the Coops when he first moved in? Any of his experiences or family experience? I mean, because he would have had to have been maybe one of 16 or 17 black families at the time.
Very few. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I think he felt that the separation, that there was a separation that wasn't quite accepted.
yeah,
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 yeah. Yeah, yeah. That was so. I mean, the women liked him, but they were parents involved and stuff. But no, I think it was good for him. I mean, it was a good experience. It broadened his outlook.
yeah.
Obviously,
Sure.
it was very political. Oh, my daughter's not her conference call. I see
Oh yeah,
her.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Tommy Warner characterized it the same way. He said, I think from what I remember, he said the phrase, we were a little segregated ourselves, even though you're living in the Coops. Um, but yeah,
Mhm.
but did I mean, I think by the time you would have, you know, had more consistently like conscious memories that might have already been different. But did you notice uh, much change with the Coops as far as how uh, white and black families related when you were growing up, or
No,
no? About the
no, no, I don't, no.
about the same, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, people were, each person is an individual, you know, it's,
Sure.
yeah, it didn't, I didn't feel it. Now, Edith, that I was saying about not wanting me and Reggie to take over their apartment,
Yeah.
um, she had said once that Angie, and this had to be in relation to Reggie and the place, the club.
Yeah.
She said, Angie said, well, we won't rest until every black man is with a white woman, and scared the hell out of me. Okay, yeah, okay, you know that. So I think that probably was part of why they put the girls in there with them,
Okay, I see.
that club,
Yeah.
because Angie had a lot of power,
I
and and it was destined to doom when that happened.
so Angie wanted to I guess foster more interracial couples, and probably no one else, both black and white, were very much on board with that, I imagine.
Right, right,
Wow, okay. Yeah,
right.
I hadn't heard any of that actually.
Well,
So
that's what Edith said.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I mean, it wouldn't necessarily surprise me knowing some of the other positions that
Hmm.
Angie took on things.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I
yeah,
remember my father was called to jury duty, and Angie was the person suing whatever it was about. And my father excused himself because he knew Angie, and she
yeah.
was furious with him. I don't know what the case is about. I mean, I was a kid still, you know, but I just remember that he said Angie was furious with him.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah. It was fun. It was
um,
fun.
yeah. Do you remember? Did you have many run-ins with Angie, or did you?
No, I really didn't know her. I mean, I knew her from the neighborhood. I knew she was, I mean, Charlotte, but she always seemed very tough to me.
Yeah,
And then one day I was looking through the window and I saw her greet Reggie,
yeah,
and she was just like a little girl. And I realized she had a tough time. I mean, I think her husband was weak
yeah,
and she was very powerful,
yeah, definitely.
but she liked Reggie. So I saw in her a different view when I
Yeah,
saw her through the window, the way she greeted him. Hi, Reg. You know, it's so sweet. I said, oh my goodness. But he said he'd just go to card games at her house.
yeah,
There's a lot of people there, a lot of sharks.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. I mean, at at least at one point, I think this would have been before you were born, or maybe when you were very, very young.
Uh-huh.
Um, uh, you know, I believe that like W.B. Du Bois might have stopped by once. I think usually people would go to him, but I think he might have stopped by from what Charlotte remembers. Uh, and like Kwame Nkrumah, before he was president of Ghana,
Uh-huh.
as the UN, of course, used to meet up here. Uh, I think where Lehman College is located,
Ah,
Honor College, on their campus before the whole complex was built in Manhattan. So I
right.
think he might have stopped by at Angie's too, but it was definitely a hub. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember going down to some kind of demonstration in Central Park, and my friend Mickey, the one that got killed on the bicycle, she was at that point she was represented Gene McDaniels. I don't know if you remember him. He was a singer.
Oh, okay.
He was singing their 100 Pounds of Clay.
Hmm.
But then all these politicos came out, and there was Angie. Standing with them, yeah. So,
Oh, that's funny.
so she was very interesting. Yeah, she was quite a character. She was
Yeah,
quite a character.
yeah.
Yeah.
And uh, as far as to I guess go back for a second to racial dynamics at the
All over the place. Yeah.
yeah. Do you remember about when at least a lot of white Koopniks started to leave
Co-op City went.
Co-op City? Yep. Yeah.
Co-op City did it. Co-op City. It happened too fast.
Yeah. It drained people from all over the Bronx. And,
Yeah. And it caused a tremendous change overnight.
Yeah.
It's actually interesting now. There's this diverse bunch. Actually, there's people from Cambodia here that take care of the gardens, and it's just beautiful. She's got a beautiful thing going. And a lot of people worked here when they first came from Cambodia, so that was interesting. But no, the Coops changed really. Co-op City just did a number.
Yeah.
It really did, yeah.
So, so what kinds of changes did you start to notice when most of the older residents started to leave?
Well, it just, I don't know. It just all of a sudden everything changed. The whole thing changed, and then the more Puerto Ricans would move in, the more whites would move out.
Okay.
As it started changing,
Sure.
people started moving out. I mean, Al Wood lived here. He moved to Co-op City.
Yeah. I mean, Tyke moved to Co-op City too. Tyke.
Tyke was part of Angie's family.
Yeah.
He was friends with Reg. Yeah. Is Tyke still alive?
No, he's not.
No, I wouldn't think so.
But he had 4 daughters, I think. And I believe all of them are still alive. I know at least a few of them are. There might be one who's passed. I have to still look into that. But yeah, so I mean, I think, I mean, that's one thing that sometimes I don't always see when people write about Co-op City is it kind of drew definitely plenty of white residents around the Bronx, but also, a fair amount of Black residents who'd lived elsewhere and Puerto Ricans as well. And a lot of the residents who'd been in a particular neighborhood for a while, and then people who are new to the Bronx or new to that area move in. So it's not necessarily only white flight. It's kind of like,
it changed everything.
Yeah. Neighborhood destabilization with.
Yeah, and then it was built on a dump.
Yeah. And then you had the whole rent strike that had to take place there just 5-6 years after it opened.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when did like the auditorium, the club rooms, the library, when did all of those start to become out of use?
Well, I know that the auditorium still had meetings. I remember Angie doing a meeting there, and that would have been, I guess, in the 70s, in the early 70s.
Okay.
It was very funny because there was some people that I knew from the neighborhood, kind of remnants of the ROT and whatnot.
Yeah.
And, young ones. And I had gone to the meeting where Angie was talking, and the person turned out to me. She said, "I thought it was Angie Dickinson."
Oh, the movie star, huh?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It was very funny. She said, "When is Angie Dickinson going to be on?" I said,
"You're looking at her."
Yeah, right. No, Dickerson.
Yeah, Dickerson. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's funny, but it was, still just used slightly. It was The dancing, I don't know. I guess I must have been 8 or 9 when we stopped dancing there. Like I said, people don't even remember the dinners. I mean, it was so nice. They were really, really special, during the
Yeah.
Jewish holidays. They were very nice.
So they were put on for the Jewish holidays. Any
Yeah, yeah,
other events or?
probably.
Yeah.
I mean, we used to do shows, Bible shows and show and different things, but
Sure.
and bazaars.
Yeah.
They did bazaars there, but it was probably when it became a historic landmark. Was
I
probably when they started closing off everything.
and what's the auditorium used for now?
It's Workers has stuff down there. That's
And
all.
that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
What was the library is a washing machines.
Yeah.
Yeah, the clubs are closed off.
And you told me when we spoke the first time, but what happened to the books with the library?
I was told that somebody found out that they were getting the dumpsters because they were all over the floor. They were everywhere, and they were sent to New Jersey, I believe, to the Yiddish thing that's in New Jersey. There's a preservation. Because
Okay.
I know my cousin Beverly sent a lot of books that her mother had there.
Yeah.
Because she's involved with that. She's the one who has all the information that I told you that she has everything her mother chronicled. So you'll have to contact her at some point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
By the time you were a child, did you or anyone else spend much time in the library ever?
Never.
Never.
It was, it always seemed to me to be men. It was probably some women, but almost like a kind of reform type of a shul, where men would discuss.
Okay, I see.
But it was always more like you just peeked in the windows.
Yeah.
I never was even inside of it.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, I don't think I haven't spoken with anyone that was alive or that used it during its heyday. So
I'm sure my grandfather did.
yeah.
But
I actually um, acquired recently. It's like an old 1936 party platform, for the Communist Party.
yeah,
And it's stamped, United Workers Cooperative Colony Library.
interesting.
I don't know how it ended up. I got it from like a rare antiques, rare book dealer. I don't know how it ended up with them, but
It's fascinating. Somebody must have given it to them.
it's back in the Bronx
I
now.
love it.
So.
I actually have like a brass thing that was in my foot when I was emptying the house upstate of Lenin.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know where it is. It's somewhere here. But
Yeah. I definitely remember reading a few little, memoirs kind of writing of people in the Bronx who remember the bust of Lenin coming down, right at around 1949, 1950, and going into the closet because of, everything going on with.
right.
But
So maybe this was just the face.
sure.
So I don't know. Maybe that was part of it. But somehow my father ended up with it.
That's
So, he was funny. My father also ended up with like communist symbols or hammer and sickles and swastikas.
yeah.
I said he was always fascinated. My father was always obsessed with that. So
Yeah.
I
Sure.
inherited his obsession.
um, but yeah, I'm trying to think here. We've covered so much ground. I mean, I'm sure there'll probably be other things that occurred to you or to me, pretty
I'm
much
sure.
after we get off the conversation even. But yeah, think I think that's all the questions I have for the time being. Is there anything that occurs to you, or anything that you'd like to share that we haven't discussed so far?
No, but I'm sure as soon as we get off the phone, I'll think of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and if there's a lot, we can, or even just a small amount, we can record another oral history. Um,
Absolutely. I'm
and
sure there'll be stuff because it seems like we didn't touch anything.
I know, it's so hard with this because there's so much ground to cover, and it is always hard to recall certain things in the moment, and then afterwards things might come flooding back, um, and yeah, you have it especially difficult since your family has been at the Coops for so long, and since you are, sharing information about both your family and Reg's family, and so much.
Yeah, and it was so funny. One day, my cousin's daughter was on Facebook, and she had taken a picture of an apartment she had when she was living in Brooklyn, and there were the flying birds that Reggie and his friend had created on the wall. And I never told her, but I said, "Oh God, I hope she doesn't get rid of that because it was
Wow.
yeah." But there was her. She must have gotten them from an antique store.
Yeah. Wow,
There's,
that's something.
there was something. Yeah, I know his brother had a set, and that was given to somebody one of the relatives that lived on Martha's Vineyard. So it's
Oh,
still around.
I see. I
But
see. Wow.
yeah,
But yeah, yeah, I'd be curious to see, what else exists uh, from that period of his.
yeah, yeah. They were wonderful. Like he was saying, how cheap they were selling. And what was happening was somebody was copying their designs. So they took a lot of time and used really good woods and really, handmade all this stuff. And somebody with money was just copying everything they were doing.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Right. And the person who he was working with, Lilo, she wanted to get their arms broken. So Reggie had to bow out of the whole thing because he was not a mafia man.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. That's
Uh,
not so, but they couldn't compete because, I mean, every time they came up with a different design, this person was mass producing.
wow. Wow. Mm.
Yeah. I
But
suppose I said they should have been sold as art rather than as just wall decoration because
yeah,
that's what it was. They were really,
for sure.
yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so when he stopped producing those, that's when he uh, uh, joined the Garment Workers Union.
I don't know. I don't know
Okay.
when he got involved with the union. Might have been before then. Might have been something he went back to
Yeah,
during
yeah, yeah,
during the time.
yeah,
I guess he was in his 20s when he got involved with that with Lilo.
yeah.
Yeah, and then soon after that he moved back to the Bronx.
Sure, sure, sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, but but yeah, do you know anything about the more distant history of his family?
He said they came from North Carolina.
North Carolina. Okay, I see.
He was always told he was Indian. He looks Indian.
Mm.
When his granddaughter had her DNA done, there was no Indian.
Oh, huh, huh.
which can happen
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
they say you can, your sister, you'll have different DNA mixture for some reason. It doesn't come out like that.
Sure, sure.
But yeah, but she was shocked
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
because she looked Indian,
Yeah,
and his granddaughter looks Indian. So did
yeah,
Reggie. So did his father. I mean, tremendously. His father
yeah,
really looked Indian. I
yeah,
think I probably have on Facebook, but it's probably these things are so hard to find when you go look. Maybe not. A picture of him like at 6 years old at his sister's wedding.
oh, I'll have to look for that.
Such a little prince. I'll send it to you because
Okay.
I'll
Yeah,
send it to your email.
yeah,
Yeah,
good, good.
yeah. But yeah, he says really he looked like a little prince. He really did. He was.
Wow. Yeah, so he really had uh uh despite what the DNA, might or might not say, he really had a very diverse background. I mean, and grew up in uh, where there's such a mix of, various cultures. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. But he saw himself as Black. People would meet him who didn't know, you know.
Sure.
And his son definitely saw himself that way. He didn't recognize anything else but that, even
Yeah.
though his birth mother was Jewish, he didn't see
Sure.
that. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, but yeah, and I forget. I forget what you said. Is his son still alive?
No, his son died of cancer about 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Oh,
10 years ago,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very sudden. It was very quick. Well,
Right.
quick 2 years. But
Yeah.
he was quite something. I said his son was a sportsman.
Yeah.
He was a mentor. He mentored lots of kids. He got hurt on his own time teaching,
Yeah.
coaching the kids after school. And then he continued as he was City College's women's basketball coach.
Mm,
Then after he was attacked, he became the men's basketball coach.
okay. Yeah.
And then he became the second as far as all sports in City College.
Wow.
And that's what he was doing when he got sick.
Yeah. Wow.
And then probably partly to do, Reggie got shingles
Mm,
and then went down. He fell down and he ended up in a nursing home for about 6 months.
yeah.
And I was working downtown, so Gary would go and get chemo and
Yeah.
then come and take care of Reggie and make him get up, move around. And Reggie would say, "Oh, you shouldn't even come and visit me. Oh, you bother me." And Gary would call me up and laugh and say, "Oh yeah, he gave me a hard time, but he's not gonna intimidate me. I deal with kids all the time."
Yeah.
So we did it together. We got him out of there.
Yeah.
So it was something because you don't want to move. Once that happens,
For
kind
sure.
of like. But Gary wouldn't say no. He'd get him there. He'd make him go do his physical therapy. He did it. He did it. I said I would have left with my head in my lap. Like that. Gary said, "Ah, he ain't gonna. He's not gonna intimidate." Gary was a sag. He's a real sag.
Yeah.
He's quite a spirit.
Yeah. It sounds like it. It sounds like it.
He was very special.
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
So I guess you have to get moving. Probably it's probably time for you to go home. I'm looking at my time.
Yeah. I'll start closing things up now. Let me. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording here.
Yeah.